Welcome, everyone. I see they have brought these up here. They know who they're talking about. We all know why we're here. The gaming industry lost one of its most visionary leaders when IGA Chairman Ernest Stevens tragically passed away just 10 days ago. On behalf of the entire industry, I send my condolences to Cheryl, the Stevens family, and all of you who Ernie touched. To a generation of gaming professionals, Ernie was a friend, he was a mentor, and he was an inspiration. I think about when I became CEO of the American Gaming Association, one of the first calls I got was from Chairman Stevens. And I didn't come from the gaming industry. I had little experience, I had not many contacts, and Ernie embraced me as a friend and a brother from day one. He offered me advice when I asked for it, support when I needed it, and honestly, genuine friendship that I deeply valued. He taught me the lesson that guides me every day in my job at the AGA. Gaming's strength and its success comes from unity. He knew that for gaming to thrive as an industry, all participants needed to prosper. He understood that for gaming to reach its full potential, all of us need to work together. He believed that for gaming to grow and expand, all of us need to succeed. He was a proud member of Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and a fierce advocate for tribal sovereignty. He saw gaming as a driver of economic prosperity in tribal nations, a source of opportunity for tribal citizens, and a means to strengthen tribal communities. During his 24-year leadership of IGA, tribal gaming revenue grew from $11 billion to $50 billion. But the real impact of tribal gaming is felt way beyond the dollars and cents. It's felt in the hospitals and healthcare systems that were built, the schools that were opened, the local businesses that were launched in tribal nations across America. I believe this arc of progress is the greatest success story in gaming's history. Ernie played the key role, and his work with all of us will continue. As I think about it, we should all endeavor to live a life that has purpose, to live a life that helps people. Ernie did all of those things, and we are grateful that he lived that way. Rest in peace, my friend. I will miss you. Now I'd like to invite Indian Gaming Association Executive Director Jason Giles to the stage to share a statement on behalf of the Stevens family. Jason.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming today. It's been a long week. Chairman passed last Friday, September 26th. Long week of remembering him. The IGA board, I'd like to acknowledge with us today, Treasurer Denise Harvey, Secretary Christy Malden. We were at the funeral this weekend in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the outpouring from Indian country was unbelievable. Just judging by what the local authorities and the county and the city, everybody pulled together to host all of Indian country and a lot of you folks here today that are out at G2E right now. So I thank you for that, because I know it hasn't been easy. And it hasn't been easy for the IGA board, for our staff. You'll hear story after story. The day he passed, we had all either talked to him that day, the day before. He was in DC as recently as that week, and he was in good health. And it's just one of those things, as Bill said, you know, you want to live your life with purpose, and you want to live your life moving forward, and Chairman Stevens did that. And the hardest thing, of course, has been watching his family have to process this and having to deal with the fallout. Our job has just been there to be support. We're going to honor him in our way over the next couple months and into the next years. But as Bill said, he was such a legend that it's going to be hard to replace. And we have this great historic building in Washington, D.C. It's called the Watterson House. It was a Revolutionary era building. It was the quarters for the first Librarian of Congress. The Continental Congress built it for him in 1797. And Chairman Stevens has overseen the refurbishment and the expansion of that building, but he never referred to it as the Indian Gaming Association building. We've always referred to it as Indian Countries building. And that was what he saw when he first came on early in his tenureship as chairman in the early 2000s. And everyone says, and we know that people are out there, chairman for 20 years, several elections, but he had a vision. Our association was more than just about gambling, because it didn't start with gambling. It started with tribal sovereignty. And when the folks that were fighting for tribal sovereignty before there was an IGA, when they were taking their Supreme Court cases up, fighting the state of Florida, California, all the commercial gaming in Nevada was opposed, that was all about tribal sovereignty. And Ernie was on the front line of those battles with a lot of the tribal leaders in this room today. And so those tribal leaders that had the foresight that we need a lobbying arm in Washington, D.C., because our congressmen and senators are not supporting us like they should, that was part of his vision. And now we have this great building, hopefully remain in tribal hands for eternity. As long as there's the United States, that building has got to stay in Indian Country's hands, because before that, there was little to no representation, especially on gaming issues. And we had our model partner, NCAI, that for a long time, since 1944, had been fighting on Capitol Hill. But as we all know, we needed allies. And there was no better ally to have than Chairman Stevens when he came walking into a room with a bunch of tribal leaders. And I think that'll be his legacy, and that's what we're trying to live up to. So at this time, if you'll indulge me for just a few minutes, I just want to say a few words on behalf of his family. They were scheduled to be here, and they just couldn't make it. And we, having been there, and the emotional toll this weekend took, and the ceremonies, like a lot of cultures, it's not just one day, it's several days. Everybody has their time to grieve and their way to grieve. And I think it exhausts you. And as everybody knows, during the actual funeral, if you've ever, lost somebody close, it's all blur until everyone's gone and you turn around, and then that's when you realize they're really gone, because all their stuff is still there, the car's parked in this driveway, and you're waiting for them to come home, and you just know they're not. So very tough time for the family, and we thank Bill Miller and American Gaming Association for doing this and acknowledging his wife Cheryl, his lovely sons and daughters, 20 grandchildren. So I'll just read this real briefly, and we'll bring out our guests to commemorate Chairman Ernest Stevens. Over the course of more than 2 decades, our dad elevated the Indian Gaming Association to one of the most influential organizations in Washington, D.C. His tireless advocacy for tribal sovereignty, guiding tribal governments through transformative growth, from an $11 billion industry in 2000 when he first came to IGA to a $49.4 billion industry in 2024. Tribal government gaming is now one of the largest sectors of U.S. gaming in America. He was more than a chairman, though. He was our warrior, a statesman, champion for all of Indian country. His vision and commitment built bridges across tribal nations, Congress, federal agencies, to ensure that tribal gaming remained a cornerstone of tribal self-determination and economic growth. His legacy will be unmatched, and his voice will echo for the generations to come. He always expressed pride in the strong partnership between the Indian Gaming Association and the American Gaming Association, highlighted by these two associations' shared commitment to growth in the gaming industry. He will always be our father and our mentor, but we know he meant so much more to Indian country and those he served. He always said his greatest accomplishment was his family. And at this time, I'd like to do a moment of silence for his wife, Cheryl, his children, Brandon, Ernest III, Margaret, Maria, and Lois, as well as his 20 grandchildren who were all at that funeral and all deeply hurt by his loss. And at the same time, you could see they were carrying on, including one of his oldest grandchildren went and played their game Friday night after his funeral service, his football game as quarterback. So at this time, I'd like to just take a quick moment of silence. Please honor his family in your own way. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll just say, on behalf of our IGA staff, we want to give a heartfelt God bless to Chairman Stevens. And we know that he always had our backs and he supported us. And one of the things that I learned over and over this past weekend in Green Bay, his family members coming up to me and saying he really loved his staff. He finally felt that he had a staff that represented all of Indian country and that he could rely on. And I think he treated us that way for the time I was there for certain. And then even through COVID and after COVID, when we've had a lot of turnover, when I think a lot of people had to deal with issues regarding staffing, and I wish, we heard that from him. He would come every Christmas to our Christmas party and express those wishes, but we wish we had him one more time this Christmas. And with that, I'd like to briefly just say a couple words before I introduce our panelists today who are going to help us remember Chairman Stevens. And really, what Ernie wanted us to present today is kind of immaterial after his passing. But again, what you're going to see up here is a show of unity and strength. And Bill's opening remarks, he said Ernie was always talking about unity. And unity's hard, let's be honest. It wasn't so easy to be unified with Nevada Gaming Resorts if you were California tribal Indian. And even Ernie, in the face of all that during those times, himself had to face a lot of, we'll just say it was discrimination. Because I came in early in the 2000s, and I was shocked at the way he would be treated around here or from folks at MGM. It was jarring back in those early days because we were competitors, and people were going to thought they would lose share. But he always said, let's be statesmen. Let's not go down that road. Let's just keep preaching unity. We'll just keep reaching out, educating. And a lot of that, I know he conveyed to our board, but also to our personal tribal friends, and two of them are here today. Mr. David Bean from the Puyallup Tribe of Indians in Washington State, right outside of Seattle. David has been tribal chairman, longtime tribal councilman, been on the board of Indian Gaming Association, and he was there through thick and thin in their own battles in Washington State. And Ernie related to that, and he related to Dave's ancestors, and he related to all those early 1970s and 80s Washington tribal leaders that had to fight their state government, but also their congressional representation. And those were battles, whether it was over salmon, natural resources, jurisdiction, hunting, you name it, they fought it. And then here comes gaming. And Dave will talk about it, all the great leaders that came out of there. Ernie knew those folks. And I think that's what you're going to find out today is he could not only relate to someone like a Dave Bean, but his ancestors and their grandfather. Our other guest will be Francis Alvarez. San Pasqual Band of Kumeyaay Indians, another personal friend of his. And one of his big things when he started gaming and when I came on, he was always like, we have to get more women involved in this industry. We have to push our young folks to get involved in this industry, men and women. And he was a big, big champion of recognizing women in gaming. I don't know anyone else who was really doing it until Indian Gaming Association started doing that. And Frances, over 25 years in gaming experience. She's worked for commercial gaming. She worked at BMM. She was a tribal gaming commissioner at San Pasqual. She runs the Tribal Gaming Protection Network, and she's also president of the National Native American Hall of Fame. So I'm going to ask them to come out, and we're going to take our seats, and we're just going to share a couple stories with Chairman Stevens, about Chairman Stevens and his legacy. And I hope you'll appreciate who he was. We'll give you a little more background and insight on who he was and where he came from. And you'll probably be shocked to hear some of where he came from. But at this time, Dave and Frances, please come out and join me.
Jason, good job.
Right,
good job.
Thank you, man.
Good job.
Well, Dave, emotional long weekend.
Yes.
And, just like anyone else in his immediate working relationship, we had discussions with him right before he passed. Can you share with the audience what Chairman Stevens meant to you and sort of what you thought of, when you first heard the bad news and then all of what Chairman Stevens represented for you in your journey through Indian gaming?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. That was a beautiful tribute, the word you shared, and thank the Bill Miller and American Gaming Association for taking the time to honor a great man. When we heard the news, it was unreal. He's our superhero. He's our superhero warrior, and your warriors are invincible. And when we got to the Oneida Reservation, first thing we did was we went to the fire, and his wife Cheryl was there, and she said the same thing. This isn't real. This does not feel real. But, as Ernie did throughout life, he showed us in his passing that he was human. He showed us every day when he spoke about his wife, about his family, about his grandchildren, about our women warriors, about our tribal leaders across the United States. He told stories, and those stories were about family, community, culture. Through his words and through his actions, day in and day out, whether it was at home or on the road, his stories reminded us why we do the work that we do, why we tribal leaders do the work. That's to take care of our family first and foremost, to take care of our communities, to protect tribal sovereignty, to protect Indian gaming. And he didn't just say those words. I watched him traveling with him. He meant that. Every word he said, he meant. He loved his wife, he loved his children, he loved his community, he loved Indian country. And he was our modern day, warrior, superhero. And I've learned so much. Interesting story, he always talked about buying jewelry for his wife. And my wife, she came with me to Oneida to his funeral, and we gifted his wife a necklace that was made by a Pomo man. And I listened to my wife tell the story. She goes, your husband taught my husband how to buy jewelry for me. And it was a hummingbird made out of abalone. And she says, this is the first piece he bought me. And she took it off and she gave it to Cheryl. And it really touched me because Cheryl said, that's my favorite bird. We had no way of knowing this. But that's who Ernie was. I mean, he was always taking care of his wife. Even in death, he was able to get her a piece of jewelry. And so, I'm thankful for the time I got to spend with him and tag along and just listen and learn. And, a lot of the calls came in, and after he passed, first, I'm really sorry they say this, and then next question, so are you the chairman now? So what's next? And I had to politely and respectfully let those leaders know, where I come from. We take care of this work first. We take care of his family. We take care of our chairman. We lay him to rest, and then we'll take care of business. That's the type of man Ernie was. And he would take care of, his cultural responsibilities. He would take care of family first, and then get on the road and take care of business. And so now that we've laid him to rest in a loving way, in a respectful way, I was there to witness. I come from the Northwest, from the Puyallup tribe. And our elders tell us, you're a witness to the work that's being done here. And so I can proudly say that, I witnessed the work that his family did, his children, his grandchildren, and they did all the work to make things easier on Cheryl. And his brother Ricky over here, who was by his side all the time, I watched Ricky work tirelessly, 2-3 hours of sleep a night. So I was witness to that. They did it in a good way. They did it in a loving way, and they did it in a respectful way. And I'm thankful for the lessons that Chairman Stevens has taught each and every one of us. Of all the titles he held, he was our chairman. He was first vice of the National Congress of American Indians. He was first vice to Chairman Ron Allen. And he really talked about Ron as a big brother, a mentor. And he held positions on several boards. But of all the positions he held across, Indian country, he would be the first to say his proudest role was to be a husband, a father, and a grandfather. And I'm thankful for the time that we've had with him. And that's what he meant with me. He meant to me was, we take care of family, we take care of our community, we take care of Indian country, we protect tribal sovereignty, we educate, we advocate, and we do it in a respectful way. No matter what, whether our opponents are being disrespectful, we will do this in a respectful way. He was a statesman. Thank you for that time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. If you ever heard Chairman Stevens speak, he could be long-winded. But I think Ron, our good friend Ron Allen, was the first that said, Ernie had always had 3 or 4 conclusions, in conclusion. And but one of the things that was always a staple of a part of his speech, and I'm sure you've heard it, was his tribe was matrilineal. And the women ran the tribe. And he always made sure to mention, he would jokingly say, oh, there's an election this year, I just go to the polls and vote for whoever my wife tells me to. Things of that nature. He had lovely daughters and granddaughters, and he really had a lot of empathy for what women were dealing with and what they were facing, because he saw it with his own wife, who was a working mom, and his children, who had their own children. And Francis, you knew him longer than I did, for sure, but talk a little bit about, if you will, I think that's a side that most folks don't know, is how he would promote women in Indian gaming. He would promote tribal leaders, female tribal leaders, because let's be honest, even in Indian country, there was a lot to overcome with just, the way a lot of tribes are set up. There's still a lot of patrilineal tribes out there where women can't become the chief or governor of their tribe because of history and culture. But that's the way they do things. But, Chairman Stevens, he'd be the first one to tell you, no, not everything doesn't have to stay the same. And if you could share with us, how he helped you in your journey through Indian gaming, and then, of course, all women and specifically tribal female leaders.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Iga, and everyone for being here. This is a tremendous responsibility of carrying Chairman's legacy, and he gave us the path. He gave us the path to move forward. When I first really started to be mentored by Chairman, one of the first questions he asked me was, what was my why? Maybe not in those words, but really, what was my why? Do I have a passion to serve? And he made it very clear that that was absolutely necessary when serving the Indian country, because you're going to go through a lot of struggles, challenges, you're going to be opposed in many ways. But if you have this strong passion to serve, which he did, then that was going to carry you through. And I did, and I still do. And that's how we connected. Chairman didn't always have to be there by phone call or be there, in physical presence to give me advice. Anytime he just entered the room, I'm sure you can all attest to his spirit, it just filled everyone with that courage and that strength. It wasn't just the strength behind that fist pump he did all the time. It was the strength that he brought into the room with just his presence alone. Chairman was a tremendous advocate for women in gaming. We all know this. He spoke every opportunity he got about his mom. She was a strong advocate for Indian rights. We all know how he loved and cherished Cher, his wife, and his family. And there was no distinction between the love he had for his family and the love he had for Indian country, or even the board that served with him. It was all the same. It was his big heart. He was like a big, Papa Bear? Yeah, opposite of Mama Bear. He was like a big Papa Bear. He loved us. He loved this industry. And he didn't hold back that love when it came to mentoring me.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah.
I do want to say, because this is important for me, thank you for giving me this opportunity, but everyone in this room is here because he touched our hearts.
Yes.
And this is a testament to the legacy that he built, and we're going to continue to do it as we unite. If we unite in the boardroom, if we unite in our memberships, whatever it is, the issues, legislation that we're uniting on, remember Chairman's ways. His ways were for us to be one. We are stronger in numbers. We are stronger when we're together. And let's all do our role in carrying that legacy.
And Francis, thank you for talking about it.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I look at this conference as a prime example of Chairman's preaching unity, because when I first came to this conference with him in the early 2006, 7, 8, we were not partners at all here. We were not up on the big stage. Indian gaming was barely talked about. We didn't have the big booth we have now. It was he came here knowing and expecting that we were not full partners with the regular gaming industry, and a lot of them didn't look at us that way. Again, they looked at us as competitors. Mm-hmm. But I'll say, the way he approached unity was unique from my perspective in he had a lot of empathy. And, maybe the people that worked with him, Ricky, myself, we saw the other side of where, he could be stern and hard, and he couldn't go to sleep if stuff was on his mind. He's going to call you at 9:30 at night if something, and it could be trivial, but it bothered him, and he wanted to get it off his chest. But he had this empathy. And for those of you that didn't know him, because he really, as much as he tooted his own horn about basketball and boxing, and we know all those things, but, you know, he didn't talk much about his upbringing and growing up in LA. And growing up, he literally told me, running the streets. And it was a hard life in LA. And there's a big Indian community, for those of you that don't know. There's a lot of Native Americans in Los Angeles. My own tribe, the Muskogee Creek tribe, has over 15,000 tribal members that live in LA. And a lot of that is because the boarding schools were out west. And folks would get taken to the boarding schools. And, you know, they didn't know their reservation. They had to get a job. They would go to the biggest city, the nearest biggest city. And that, a lot of times that was LA. So there's a big Native American community out there. And if you can imagine LA back in the 70s, early 80s, it was totally different back then. And you could run up and down Hollywood Boulevard, and it was kind of scary back then, because Chairman told me all these stories, and his life was hard. And I'll never forget one time when he sat down, we were having lunch with U.S. Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, and I don't think he'd mind if I told this story, but Ben Nighthorse Campbell was basically homeless growing up, and he was running the streets. And to hear them talk about how that shaped their view of this country was fascinating, because when they saw homeless people, it was, there I go, but by the grace of God. They could empathize with people that were struggling, that were down and out, and they saw themselves in that predicament. And I think they both wondered, like, how did we get out of that? What saved us from that? And you know, it was family, but it was also our Native American community. And if you embrace the Native American community, they'll embrace you back, and they'll forgive you for whatever you've done, because that's the Indian way. And you know, that's one of the things, Dave, I think I mentioned it briefly, the struggles that the tribes in Washington State faced. But when he was chairman of this organization, there were big struggles that threatened to tear us apart, whether it was land and trust issues, gaming, so-called off-reservation gaming, which was a complete misnomer. But he stood the fight, and he just would tell people, he would tell them in private, we can't have you up bad-mouthing another tribe. Please don't bad-mouth my tribal leader brother over here or my sister over here. He was fighting those internal battles within Indian country to try to keep us united. And for the large part, it worked. And for the most part, it was effective on Capitol Hill. And if you can talk a little bit about that, Dave, because I just don't think most people, as much as Ernie liked to brag about himself, he didn't touch. I mean, I'm sure he mentioned plenty of times he was a recovering alcoholic. And he always said, I'm a recovering alcoholic, 35 plus years sober, and you're still saying I'm a recovering alcoholic. Because he appreciated the strength and the struggles that people.
Yeah, no, Chairman always talked about how we were stronger together. And, Jason opened up with comments about how the industry grew under Chairman Stevens' leadership. And Chairman would be the first to tell you that he did not do it alone. Mm-hmm. He talked about the attorneys. He says, as much as, he may disagree with some of them, he says he would not go into battle without his attorneys. He talked about our women warriors. He said he would not go into battle without our women warriors. And, like Jason said, that whether there was a disagreement or tribes battling with one another, he had to let them know that, battling and putting each other down kind of weakens us. And so we have to come together. We have to find a pathway forward. And so, thinking about, all the comments, there will never be another Ernie Stevens Jr. People say there's some really big shoes to fill, and we had this conversation in the back room. And I think, by coming together, by being our authentic selves, which Ernie was his authentic self. There wasn't really a blueprint. He had a lot of lessons. but there were challenges that were unforeseen, just like his passing was unforeseen to everybody. We have to just come together and move forward together. That's what Ernie would want us to do. Come together, move forward together. I always say, back home in Puyallup Tribe, I, didn't always wear a suit. I wore a button up, my sleeves were always rolled up, ready to work. My mantra was stay in motion, forward motion. And I think with Ernie's approach to everything, I think that's why we got along so well. He would say, we still have work to do. Now let's get out there and do it. Take care of your responsibilities. We got work to do. Let's move forward together. So that, with respect to, bringing people together, he had a strong ability to bring people together from so many different backgrounds, from so many different directions, and find that common ground. He listened to his elders. He talked about, Rick Hill. He talked about Jerry Danforth. And when I was back there this week, I had to ask Chairman Tahasi Hill, I says, what's in the water here, bro? You've produced, this community has produced some incredibly strong warriors nationally. And so I wanted to drink some of that water. But listening to the stories, spending time with his mom, his bros in the community, his sisters. I have a sister back home by the name of Anna Bean. And boy, she gives me a hard time. No matter what I do in DC and all the friends I make and the stories I tell, she would just cut me down as soon as I got back. As only a sister would do. And I met some of Ernie's sisters. And they're like, oh, he may be big stuff out there, but here he's just Steve. And just proceeded to get on him. But I'm like, oh, this is where the trash talking began. I see it. This is where he gets it from. But through that res humor, it exists on every reservation. And so that's what, made Chairman who he was, growing up in LA, growing up in Milwaukee. He talked about growing up with some ruffians. Ricky's one of them, right? But all those challenges and the challenges he faced growing up, his father being working in DC under Nixon, his mom being a part of the AIM movement. He saw, the diplomatic side. He saw the aggressive warrior side, through his parents. And, that helped mold and shape who he was, and that helped create his value system of lifting up women, but more importantly, bringing people together to tackle whatever issue was in front of us, whatever challenge. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And Francis, one of the things he did do, and this was probably a lot under the radar, at least forward-facing, big supporter and constant reinforcing of our tribal gaming commissions. And he would attend every national tribal gaming commissioner conference. He would go to the tribes whenever they opened a new facility. He would go at the invite of any tribal gaming commission. He always put in the forefront of his speeches to Congress, anywhere he was, that our tribal gaming professionals are the first line of defense for Indian gaming. And we took that seriously. And I'll give you another tidbit that you didn't know about Chairman Stevens. He's a law and order guy. He is a law and order guy. And he knew that that's funny coming from, and he called himself a thug, coming from the streets of LA, doing, whatever mischief he was doing in the hard streets of LA, to the Milwaukee, where he just brought his act to Milwaukee, he would say, and, rough and tumble streets of Milwaukee, until he finally met his wife, Cheryl, and then committed himself to the medicine man to never, drink or smoke again. And he, lived a clean life after that. But how many people know that he worked for a local law enforcement? It was full-on deputy, for local town in outside of Green Bay. Teasingly, when I was at the funeral, they said he was one of the first Keystone cops. But, like a lot of his stories, you get his version and then the version from his relatives. But But I know we were at Portland that year right after the Great Recession. I think it was an NCAI conference, and those riots were going on. And man, Ernie did not like rioting and all that. He's like, peaceful protest, everybody should do that, but you start engaging in this and putting police lives at risk and everything. He was a law and order guy. And he came from his dad, who was a law and order guy, Marine Corps veteran, fought in Korea, was at the Chosin Reservoir. If you know about the history of Korea, one of the worst times. His dad, battlefield promotion from like private up to staff sergeant because everybody was getting killed around him. And his dad had that aura about him. And he worked for the Nixon administration. And he didn't like it when AIM took over the BIA offices under the Nixon administration. So there's another tidbit, but I think that translated over into he saw how important it was for folks like you, Francis, to be on that front line and to catch crime, illegal activity right where it starts before it spreads out. If you can talk a little bit about his legacy for what he did for tribal gaming commissions.
Yeah, he did. He definitely had the foresight. And before I share that, I do want to share a little piece of connection, another piece of connection I had with him. I think he had to wear all of these hats. Like, it was his destiny to experience all that he did. And I feel that's how he was able to connect with everyone. He had some kind of shared experience with everyone, it seems like. And when I shared with him that I was also an urban native and I grew up in LA myself, at first I said it as from a place of embarrassment. Like I had a lack of cultural upbringing. And he told me that doesn't take away from my culture or how I believe. It just adds to it. I was able to garner a different strength from having grown up in an urban city, just as he did. And he carried that with me, and he helped me work through that and understand all of the various backgrounds we came from. Like David said, he found a way to unite us. But he did definitely have the foresight for regulation. He was out there fighting a good fight. He was out there on the front line of defense, meeting with national regulators, national leaders of this country. He was fighting for sovereignty. He was fighting for the protection and the growth of tribal gaming. But he knew that was all for nothing if we didn't have a way to protect it. So under his leadership and his vision, we created the established the Tribal Gaming Protection Network. And we're a board of tribal gaming professionals that do just that, fulfill his vision of protecting Indian country. He was adamant about protecting it not only for our existence and our growth, but also for our generations, our future generations. So with his foresight, with his legacy, we have the Tribal Gaming Protection Network where regulators come together, strengthen the industry with our shared knowledge, and also serve as protection for illegal activities.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of helped us again, where he would look for that commonality with the commercial gaming industry. And that was one of those pillars that I think both of our industries have always rested upon, is the integrity of these games that you see out here, and that you know you're going to get paid, that you know that they're fair. And that was a big deal for Indian country, because that was at the heart of all their attacks and arguments against Indian gaming, was you're just going to have this unregulated, open for crime, mob influence on the reservation. Over and over, that was the argument they used. And I think, your forefathers, Dave, and your leaders in Washington State, we all knew that was BS. That was not the Indian way. And if you can just relate a little and tell the group again how Ernie could go back generations, and he knew who those leaders were in Washington, and he had played basketball with their kids.
Oh, yeah.
It was amazing how far Ernie could go back. Even in his own family, he had a direct relative that fought for the Union Army with Wisconsin. And his grandma, was 103 or something.
Yep.
They had that direct history, and that's, I think, what a lot of people in America don't appreciate. Tribes, we have the direct, we know who our forefathers were in 1800, if not sooner, when pre-contact. We know how far it goes back. And Ernie, he knew everybody in Indian country, but not just them themselves, but their forefathers.
Absolutely. In the Northwest, we're fishing people, and we signed those treaties. As our relatives from all around the U.S. did. We believed that we were taking care of future generations. We were ceding our territory in exchange for, healthcare, housing, education, economic development, and to fish and hunt, to exercise our traditional ways, our gathering and hunting, as we have always done. And back in the 50s, 60s, folks went to exercise their tribal fishing treaty rights and met with resistance. And there was a lot of battles. Well, Chairman was there in I would say had to been mid-60s. And he went to visit some of our relatives from the Nisqually tribe in Frank's Landing. That's one of our sister tribes, Puyallup, Nisqually, Squaxin Island, and Muckleshoot. And he came up there as a teenager with his dad. And so he was able to meet a lot of folks who would go on to become tribal leaders during that time, but he saw the struggle and the battle to exercise our treaty rights. And thanks to, folks like his father, our relatives from all directions, because tribes in Washington, we did not win these battles alone. We won these battles through the Bolt decision, through the efforts of a lot of tribes coming together in support of our efforts to exercise our treaty. And so that's what Ernie saw growing up, playing basketball. He learned he was, I'm gonna be honest, he was a dirty player. He wouldn't hesitate to throw an elbow. His son Brandon talked about, him whipping that tail around. He had a metal clip in the back of his braid. And but through those battles, camaraderie was created. A lot of friends that he battled with on and off the court. These folks grew up to become tribal leaders. And I think he took his experience from traveling with his dad, with his mother. He talked to me about being at Wounded Knee. And, I talked about the longest walk in the mid-'70s. I was too young to really understand the severity, the seriousness of what was going on. But as an adult looking back, there was some serious work. We were fighting against termination. And Ernie saw that as well. He carried a weapon out at Wounded Knee, and he talked about these soldiers who saw him. He was a very large young man. At 14, he looked like a grown man, and as do his grandkids. But he had that rifle, and he said he didn't know why, but they didn't fire back on him. They must have saw he was a child, when they got close up. So, he talked about the bullets whizzing by him, but that's where he learned about working together, about protecting tribal sovereignty and just protecting his people. And, I know we're running out of time, but I see a young man here, Rory Wheeler, young Seneca man, grew up in Unity. And seeing him, I know Chairman Stephen was so proud of you and the work you did coming up through Unity, going to law school and taking that bar exam. And I'm praying for you for positive results, young man. But that's who Ernie was. He was a mentor to so many. And he was always concerned about uplifting our youth. And he founded the Youth Commission at National Congress of American Indians. And, he was a big brother. He was a mentor to so many, including myself. And spending time with Ricky, and I learned about how he would go by the Boys and Girls Club. And he got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Boys and Girls Club because he always supported Boys and Girls Club because he knew what that meant towards raising future leaders. And he would always make donations to the Boys and Girls Club. Ricky would talk about driving them up to these different clubs and, not just making these donations, but spending time with the kids. That's who he was. He was a mentor. He was a big brother to myself and so many folks. I see Chairman Butler in the audience here, and thank you for raising the issue with AGA to have this here today to make sure we tell our story and honor our big brother, because he mentored so many of us in this room, and just lifted us up and pushed us out there in the battle once he felt we were ready.
And Francis, as Chairman Stevens would have it, he would love it to have a woman give the last word. And, one thing, he was a man of contrast. And I think that was because of the way he grew up. And, 1 minute, he's cheering for the Green Bay Packers. And we happen to be in London for the ICE conference, and the Rams win the Super Bowl. And there he is the next morning, all happy the Rams won the Super Bowl. I'm like, what is going on with you? I thought you were, he's loving the Lakers, but when the Bucks win the NBA championship, he's like, go Milwaukee. I mean, but I point that out jokingly because in a lot of ways, he was this big, tough guy, dirty basketball player, but a legit professional, a semi-professional, had won titles in the state of Wisconsin, boxer. So he knew how to scrap and tumble. He had the scar to prove it from, bar fights. But how did you get to know him? And also his love of California, honestly, as much as he loved his reservation and he was happy to live there, there were times I just know he loved California. Mm-hmm. and he missed it. Anytime we'd be watching a game or something, he's like, oh, I miss LA. I could never get my family to move there. But how did you get to know him? And how did that relationship impact you? And I really want to say, a lot of the tribes in California that have always been staunch allies of what he represented.
Yeah, and I've seen in the obituary and everything I've read about him, his passing, one thing that everybody connected on or agreed to was that he was a giant force, right? He was a giant force in our industry. And he was so also in California. I can't blame him for being although you said he swayed on his sports, I can't blame him for being a Dodger fan, so
right.
Dodgers. But my relationship with him grew through our love for the industry, but also through our connection with supporting and uplifting women in the tribal gaming industry. He was a strong advocate for that. He was available. There wasn't a time that I called upon him, and Ricky can attest to this, where he wasn't available. He showed up, whether it be the Zoom call or whatever. He showed up if it were for women in the industry. And those of you who attended IGA this year, he had an inaugural class of women warriors. He presented a number of strong female leaders in our industry with this acknowledgement. And it was just the first of many to come. He promised that he was going to keep it going. It was just one small way that he wanted to recognize the women in our industry. He always spoke about his love and appreciation, but he wasn't just a man of words. We all know he was actually a man of action. Mm-hmm. He took action and he took initiative. He took initiative in the cause of supporting women. And you all had your fun stories of Chairman. I felt like I didn't get a chance to share one of mine.
Yes.
They're plenty.
The floor is yours, yes.
But as I was getting to know him, I wanted to gift him and appreciate him. And I recently read a book, and it was written by a friend of both of ours. And I was so proud to gift him this gift. Had it autographed, signed, all this fun stuff. So with pride, I gifted to him and shared with him how much I appreciate his leadership and what this book meant to me. And he took it like a gentleman. He accepted it. And he didn't say anything about it until I later realized that he was dyslexic, right? He didn't read. And I said, what the heck? Like, he was just that gentleman that he didn't pause. He just accepted it with full love and appreciation. And that's how I'm going to remember him.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, that was beautiful.
Well, on behalf of our board members here, like I said, we're going to continue to honor his legacy for the rest of this year. We have a big conference in November in Seattle, the NCAI conference, where we will, the tribal leaders and those that didn't make it to Green Bay for his services, we're going to do something special at NCAI. And of course, moving into next year, we have a lot to deal with and a lot of fallout to deal with, but we have his spirit to carry us on. And tomorrow, on the trade show floor at the IGA booth. I'm sorry, I forgot the booth number again. But between 11:30 and 1, please come by and join us. We'll have the IGA board members that are here, tribal leaders. We'd love to, just hold you, shake your hand, hug you. Remember Chairman Stevens, because he was truly in his element in atmospheres like this, and he was so welcoming, and he's so proud of this partnership with AGA that, frankly, it hasn't been that long. Even 7 years ago, we were still battling out the contours of what we can do together with the commercial gaming folks. And now we find ourselves more than ever united against things that are going on out there. And Chairman Stevens was ready for that battle, along with Bill Miller. We've got tribes that are members of the AGA now. So we've come a long, long way. And I think Chairman Stevens paved that path with his message of unity and tribal sovereignty and sticking together. So there's a reception here right as we're done. And so please hang around, share a drink with us. Ernie didn't drink, but we can. He didn't judge. He always said he had his fill, but he didn't judge. But please join us again tomorrow, 11:30 to 1, and we'll have a memorial book there that if you want to sign and leave a message, we're going to send some of this stuff back to his family so that they know he was remembered out here as well. So thank you.
Osia.
Thank you.
Thank you.